The CLCPA and the whole climate agenda has essentially obliterated local control.
Yes.
Almost, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've destroyed home rule with the the Office of Renewable Energy Siting, ORES, which essentially is been given the authority to override not only local laws and the ability for people locally to express their opinions, positive or negative, on the siting of renewable energy projects. It's also allowed them to circumvent the most basic requirements when it comes to the environmental impacts. They can override everything essentially in favor of expediting the process. This is an issue that's come up. Excuse me. Already in the courts and is already facing challenges. The whole idea that if we don't like a local law, if we don't like a restriction when it comes to the protection of habitats or lakes and waterways, that we'll just override that because because their argument is it's so critically important that we that we blanket New York State with these renewable energy projects that we should be able to override even the most basic protections for our environment and for our population is ridiculous. But that is truly their agenda. In order to meet the goals of this the CLCPA, New York State is going to have to blanket the entire upstate area with wind turbines and solar panels. There's just no question about it. And that's the goal. That's why this Office of Renewable Energy Siting was created, so that they could, as quickly as possible, blanket our region with these things. And that is a scary thought. I don't care who you are, but they've dangled a lot of money in front of people, right? You've got landowners, some of whom are struggling farmers, because of the bad policies of the last 10 years or so, that are struggling to survive, struggling to pay their taxes, and now all of a sudden you come along and dangle some money in front of them, and I can't blame them. I can't blame them for wanting to take it.
Where's the bulk of this money coming from?
Well, it's coming from the taxpayers, of course, because there is no profit in these projects, period. I don't care where it is in New York State, they do not exist without heavy and perpetual subsidy. And no one denies that, no one disputes that. You have people that say, well, the more we do this, the more efficient these things will become, and eventually they'll become self-sustaining, which is not true. Because this is the same technology we've been using for essentially 50 years. The only thing they've done is they made the projects bigger. Wind turbines, if you go look at the wind turbines like in California, if you've ever driven from like from Los Angeles to Palm Springs, you'll see the mountains dotted with these things. Those things were 100 feet tall, 150 feet tall. We're talking about massive 600-foot structures with giant blades. If you've ever seen these blades going down the road, the impact, the carbon footprint, the impact on greenhouse gases from producing and transporting and assembling these wind turbines, for example, far exceeds whatever positive impact they would have. That's because this is ultimately just an investment scam. I've said this for a long time now. This is an investment scam. The company, in fact, that I believe just recently bought one of the projects here is owned by Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs, I believe, owns the company that is now the parent company of the Arkwright Wind Project. Casadega is a foreign company. These are not energy companies. These are investment companies that own these things. And why? Because it's guaranteed return courtesy of the taxpayers. That's all this is. They are putting up these wind turbines and solar panels to profit at the expense of American taxpayers, and in this case, New York State taxpayers.
I think right now the energy that's been produced is about, between solar and wind, is not even 2%. So even if they blanket the whole state, they're not going to reach their energy objectives.
No, and unfortunately you've seen organizations that have had a good history in the past, like for example, the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA, that have been commandeered now for this. During the hearings for the appointment of the new head of NYSERDA. Actually, not new. He's been in the position since 2013. Wind turbines in Lake Erie, and he didn't know anything about it. Yet the study that's underway right now is sponsored by NYSERDA. They were basically told by the governor that they had to run this study. We already know the study is bogus. It's going to, this is just going through the motions. But the fact that the the president of NYSERDA had no idea that this was even going on, should frighten everybody in upstate New York. That this is an agenda being led by the governor's office and the radical special interests that are behind this.
And there's no constituency involvement in the placement of these. I mean, there's no, like in locally, you have the appearance of local involvement.
Well, that's really what this is ultimately about. They're not going to have to pay anybody off here, essentially, because the state owns the lake. You know, the state owns every navigable waterway in New York State. They lay claim to it. So they can do whatever they want, they claim, without having to have the approval of anybody. And that, again, is a scary prospect because, you know, Lake Erie is the source of drinking water for 11 million people. There are no large-scale wind projects in freshwater bodies anywhere in the world. We don't know what's going to happen, and we do know one thing. We know the history of Lake Erie. We know that this was declared a dead lake not all that long ago, in my lifetime, because of pollution. And we know that that stuff's still sitting at the bottom of the lake. It's covered up after a few decades. The lake has been cleaned up. But our industrial past still lies beneath the surface of that lake. And the idea of digging down into it and pouring millions of tons of concrete, disturbing the lake bed, everything else, that will absolutely jeopardize the safety of our drinking water supply. That alone is a reason not to do it. And people want to say, well, do you have any proof that that's true? Do you have any proof that it's not true? Do you have any proof that it's safe? That's the real question. You know, we have to look at what will happen should we disturb that lake bed, and what's going to happen to our drinking water. We have to look at our national security. You know, we have this is our the largest unsecured border in the world is the border between the United States and Canada, and a big portion of that is right here in Western New York and this Lake Erie border. And there's already studies that would show that those wind turbines in the lake may have an impact on the radar array that was put in place after 9/11 to protect our border. And lots of people don't realize this, but you have drug smuggling, human trafficking, all kinds of illegal activity that goes along this border with Canada. It doesn't get the attention that we get from Mexico in that border, but it happens here. And the fact that you could disrupt that radar array with these wind turbines is a national security issue. So there are a number of issues why this shouldn't happen. But let's not forget the most basic. The cost of producing electricity offshore, the cost of that electricity is more than double electricity generated by onshore renewable energy. It's not necessary. Even if you, and look, I don't want this stuff anywhere, but particularly in the lake where it's double the cost of producing it on land and 3 to 5 times the cost of traditional forms of electricity like hydroelectric power.
But do you see brownouts in the fairly near future as this thing progresses? Because he shut down gas, the generator in Dunkirk and other plants and so forth. The logical thing would be brownouts in the future.
Well, it will happen once they get further down the road, but the reason it's not happening now is because part of this scam is the fact that we are now reliant on other states for power. Western New York used to be energy independent. We generated more than enough electricity to supply our needs. Now we are no longer, that's no longer the case. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars to run transmission lines down to some of the dirtiest old-fashioned coal plants like Homer City, Pennsylvania. That is now a significant source of power for New York State because of the shuttering of plants like the Dunkirk NRG plant and the one up in Tonawanda. So that's the only reason we're not having brownouts right now, is because we've actually increased our carbon footprint by buying power from old-fashioned coal plants instead of the idea of repowering with natural gas, which is a much smaller carbon footprint, using natural gas at the very least as a bridge fuel to get us to when we can actually have a practical way to wean ourselves off of fossil fuel, if that's indeed what we even should do. Instead, we're trying to force this issue, and we're lying to the people of New York State. We're saying that we're going green, but we're not. We are now importing power that has a much worse impact on the environment than it did when we were generating it ourselves.
What sort of media is actually covering this story well? For example, the fracking that went on in Pennsylvania that was denied New York is supplying much of the energy too. a total hypocrisy. But who's covering that, would you say, in the media?
Well, nobody really. In fact, when I had this debate, when I went up to the Erie County Legislature to discuss the ban on wind turbines in freshwater lakes, they already, the people that are promoted for the Sierra Club already admit, they said, well, this is about being clean at the point of generation. They're admitting the fact that there's power coming in from other areas that's not clean and not green, and that doesn't matter to them, because again, this is all about the governor pointing to these giant pinwheels and saying, look what I'm doing, I'm the king of climate change. That's all this is. It's a politically driven agenda that is not going to, not only is it not going to have a positive impact on our greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprint, it's actually going to send us backwards, just so the governor can achieve some kind of a ridiculous political goal.
In mid-August 2021, New York Senate Republicans introduced legislation that would require the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA to conduct a full cost-benefit analysis of renewable energy systems, challenging the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the draconian CLCPA.